Good evening, everybody. It's Steve with Real Progressives, and we are sorry, from the bottom of my heart. Sorry, we're playing with the Russians here. Apparently, Russians have been hacking into our live streams and blocking progress, as it were. So, in any event, without further ado, since we've kind of kept you guys on the DL here, waiting for this to kick off, let me bring Sir Ellis onto the show. Ellis, welcome, buddy.
Здравствуйте, comrade. Хорошо.
So, all right. So, just a bit of fun here before we get started. Ellis and I, for the last 40 minutes plus, have been messing around trying to get this damn thing right. We've tried it 5 times. Finally, we're up and running. God love technology, right?
It's that infrastructure. It's marvelous.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Some good deficit spending for some good quality live streaming infrastructure.
Yeah. Good luck with that in this atmosphere, in this environment, this political environment. Yeah. No, not happening.
Well, okay. So before we get too far into our subject, I think, folks, for those of you who follow us every week, you know that we've been really, really intense. And there's a lot of good, valid reasons for the intensity. It's all legit. None of it's manufactured. All of it is straight to the point. We never lie to you. We never steer you wrong. We always tell the truth. And that's one of the most important things about the shows that we do here. But the next piece to this is, we had an opportunity. Obviously I've spoken to a lot of people from both the Green Party and the Democratic Party and other parties that are, left of center. And you find this tribalism that goes on, this absurd tribalism that you realize ultimately places party above the actual truths that we're fighting for. And so at Real Progressives, we vigorously maintain our independence from these parties, even though we support them. We maintain a vigorous, rigorous independence from them so that we can be truth tellers. And that's what tonight's discussion with Ellis is going to really be about. It really takes us past the partisan bullshit and takes us straight to the crux of the matter. The truth is the truth is the truth, whether the Republicans are in office or whether the Democrats are in office, or in some future state, the Green Party is in office, or the Democratic Socialists, and on and on and on. So, Ellis, this is a great subject tonight. I'm glad you thought of it because the areas I wanted to take us in were much darker. This sounds like it could be some fun here. So go ahead and set this up for us.
Well, I spent the last week talking to people, on social media. They send questions. Of course, I spent the last 2 days dealing with MMT purists sending me messages. But a lot of people, especially hardline Dems, they're what I called earlier in the week, DNC zombies. They're like lost. I mean, there's no hope getting to them. But, there's your average Democrat who votes Democrat because, well, the Republican can't tolerate it. But they hear the mantra coming down from, the DNC zombies, which is, deficit spending is trickle-down economics. Deficit spending is voodoo economics. So if the government is deficit spending, Ronald Reagan's ghost is infecting government and whatnot. And there's a lot of confusion about that, all right? And then secondly, the other thing that I picked up on this week, for some strange reason, was that people who are full-bore MMT, they're on board with MMT, they've been learning MMT, for some reason don't understand the concept of government having to target a deficit, Do you understand what I'm saying? If you don't aim the deficit at something, you're not going to get anything out of it. You're just throwing money into the economy, And they have trouble understanding how it is that you've got, the Republican Party deficit spending, but the economy is not responding favorably. It's taking forever, you know what I'm saying? And that's because the Republicans haven't targeted the deficit. So I said, I'll tell Steve what I'd like to talk about this week is it's not the damn deficit is the problem. It's always a good time to blow up the deficit, and that's to use an Occupy Democrats absurdity. Blow up the deficit. It's always a good time to blow up the deficit. Just not the way Republicans blow up the deficit. So I figure this could be a little bit of a learning opportunity for those people who are new, or those people who haven't quite got their feet completely submerged, to try and start up on the right foot, understanding what targeting a deficit actually means, and just blow up the deficit crap.
You like that?
It's dumb. Look at that. Blow up the deficit. Blow up the deficit. Occupy Democrats. Yeah. Bush blew up the deficit. Bush blew up the deficit. Obama reduced the deficit. Bush blew up the private sector's income. Makes no sense whatsoever. Oh.
All right, so I'm going to get a little thing in there. Occupy Democrats is full of bunk.
Well, I know they are when it comes to macroeconomics, federal spending, and theory. It's just a bunch of, talking points that you say in America. It's just a bunch of political talking points that are handed down from these think tanks and the party down to their zombies. Now, I talked about these zombies throughout the week, these DNC zombies. These are the people that you can't reach. You just got to let them go. I mean, Russia, Putin, blow up deficit, Russia. You just got to let them go.
For me, I sit there and deal with this shit all day long, and I'm sure you do too. But I get tagged into hundreds of threads a day. I can't even keep up with it. And it is always these zombies out there. When somebody tries to speak truth, they're like talking about the same Occupy Democrat worthless nonsense about, we got to reduce the deficit. Look, Trump's going to blow up the deficit. I mean,
I can't help this is funny.
It's not, okay, so here's the Jekyll and Hyde moment, okay? It's hilarious because it is full stop moronicus.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely soul crushing.
Yeah.
The bozos that Occupy Democrats have such a large following full of zombies that sit there and parrot this worthlessness that drives us into the hole. I mean, literally, these are the same parasites championing the Clinton narrative that would literally destroy our economy once and for all. I mean, we're talking about real hardcore zombies. I mean, just no getting around it.
Yeah, they're far gone. The virus has already destroyed their brain. I mean, they just do what they're told. The DNC says, say Russia, and they go, Russia. And they don't think for themselves anymore because they're so preoccupied with defeating the Republican Party. And you'll notice something, Steve. Since a lot of these MMT purists and a lot of these other MMT types, they don't want people discussing politics at all. And, I don't like politics all that much, but you have to talk about it because politics is how you get programs initiated, is it not? Okay, so you have these Democrats, and they it's all about politics, politics, and they don't stop for a moment and just say, okay, well, I'm going to drop the politics. How does federal spending work? They don't do that. They simply take the Paul Krugman tack, don't they? They just sort of whatever the Republicans are doing is wrong, so we just do the opposite.
Yeah.
You don't need a PhD. You don't need a student loan. It's just obvious. If the Republicans are deficit spenders, you just don't deficit spend. There. I mean,
but there was a lady, just to prove your point, and Patricia is running up against the buzzsaw of zombie morons. Yes. So you go back, if you ever saw the Lindsay Lohan movie Mean Girls, okay? These girls were like twirling their hair and they were worried about all their ritzy-ditzy glam and stuff like that. And anytime you had a thought that left their glitzy-ditzy glam, it was like, oh my God, like that is like so stupid. It's like so stupid. Yeah. And it's like, oh my God, there's like a cult or something. Oh my God, gag me with a spoon. And this is the kind of shit these people are having to deal with out there because these people are genuinely, I mean, we're not talking about people that say, I don't know what you're talking about. Can you educate me? We're talking about the dumbest form of person. It says, oh, that's stupid. Oh, it's a cult. Oh, that right there, I will literally go in with a laser focus and just smack the taste out of them. I can't stand it. Drives me nuts. Sorry, but you had to go through that, Patricia. Trust me.
Yeah, I mean, wow. You got these damn Democrats. I mean, they know what they're talking about any other time. You could go up to them and say, "Oi, the reason why your car is getting a rough ride on the street is because your tire's going flat." See that? Oh yeah, no problem. But if it, the moment it's a Republican that says, "I'm a Republican and your tire's going flat," no, it's not. No, it's not. Resist. And they would rather go around town bending the wheel on the car and not fill the tire with air simply because a Republican. It's just whatever. If it's a Republican, Republicans can do nothing right. Yet Democrats can do everything right. And the thing that people never notice is the Democratic Party is just a reactionary party. You ever notice that? It's the Republicans that always are proposing something, and then the Republicans go out to do it, and the Democrats resist. And then when Democrats get power, you got the president and a majority in Congress, they sort of sit there and do nothing so that they get thrown out of power so that they have something to complain about, when they got nothing to talk about. So, that's why I say in America, there's the way politics works is there's the Republican Party. And then there's the secondary party, in case you're liberal Republican but don't feel like voting Republican. I mean, that's all it's for. It's like an overflow party. Oh, you're tired of the Republicans? Oh, okay, well, vote some Democrats in. Yeah, you never hear about the Democrat revolution. You always hear about the Republican revolution,
That's right.
Might have something to do with Democrats are a very, very small minority of people. And Republicans seem to have gathered their entire base and unified it, whereas Democrats are just a small thing. And then you've got the left, and you've got progressives, and you've got all sorts of other people who aren't Democrats who just happen to vote Democrat because there's no other choice. Nobody thinks about that.
There's no coherent strategy. You should be able to easily say to the Democrats, you stand for single-payer health care, you stand for fixing the environment like now, you stand for green energy now, you stand for free college now, but no. These guys try to be Republicans, but the Republicans are so much better at being Republicans than the Democrats.
Yeah.
They're like a factory second. They're like that shirt with one arm too short. They just don't do it. They don't do it right. I don't get it.
Well, they did in the 70s. Did you see that thing that I posted from the Democratic Party's platform in 1972?
Oh, yes. Talk about that, please. Perfect.
Yeah. A lot of Democrats would be interested to know that the Democratic Party platform of 1972 declared that a guaranteed job for all who are willing and able to work was the primary concern of the Democratic Party, a job guarantee. And it also said in 1972 that the full use of fiscal policy would be necessary to achieve these ends, okay? You don't see that in the party platform today. Because Ronald Reagan came along, you see. Yeah, he's a genius as an economist. And he decided to trickle down. So, and part of trickle down, is tax cuts for the rich. Well, it blows up the deficit, Steve. It blows up the deficit. And then also he blows up the deficit spending on the military. They're blowing up the deficit. Oh, well, that must be trickle down when you blow up the deficit. So what we have to do is unblow up the deficit. We have to cut the deficit to the point where we run a surplus. Yeah, we just do whatever the opposite is that the Republican Party does.
Let me ask you a question, Ellis, because this has been driving me nuts, okay? So in the grand scheme of things, right, obviously our goal is to demilitarize our world, to end the focus on the military-industrial complex and put it back on people. However, how much of our economy has been sunk, rightly or wrongly, into the military-industrial complex, and how much of our economy is desperately sucking on the military-industrial complex because we can't get them to shift the focus to demand-side spending within the people. Well, when we talk about just cutting military spending without shifting and adding it over on the other side of the ledger, we literally will bring about a recession of epic proportions because so many of you and I are employed within those, and they did it on purpose. There's no accident here. There's so many tentacles to the military-industrial complex in every state, in every single local city, local town, whatever, where there is military spending that has gone in there to keep the octopus alive. So in order for us to keep our economy going, I mean, it's just like this arbitrary cut it without any kind of understanding of, hey, we got to pump money, we got to blow up the deficit on the people. You can't just cut and not fix. And I try to explain to folks, and it does not resonate. It just does not resonate. Can you talk through that?
Yeah, one of the things about this blow up the deficit as far as the military is concerned, what needs to be understood, even by Democrats, progressives too, that military is absolutely necessary. It's how you use the military that's the problem. So, when people get all upset with the military, what's not being understood is that a military is very important. It's just like the deficit. The deficit is very important, but the problem is where the money's going. Similarly, the military is highly important. It's just, what is it being used for? That's the question, Right. So we can't go ape shit on the military because those soldiers out there, they're risking their lives. They're serving us. It's not their fault. Yeah. But what we need to do is have a more sensible military that has a different foreign policy. That's for different experts entirely. But as far as the funding goes, when the Republicans go and they blow up the deficit to have a more militarized economy that depends on the military, what people, especially these Democrats, that you want to try and reach, not the zombies, the ones that just vote Democrat. What they need to understand is it takes a very, very long time for those dollars that are created for deficit spending to make their way into other people's hands. You see, it's going to be a direct benefit to the military, but it's not going to be a direct benefit to the economy as a whole and individuals, the people, even though the military is public purpose spending. The thing is that the majority of your spending is targeted at the military. Well, what about the people who aren't in the military, and what about people that, just everybody else? Well, it's going to take a while for those dollars to make their way to them.
That's velocity, correct?
Yeah. It's going to. What I mean to say is, when you go and you give $1 million, or let's like if you have a defense contractor down in Tampa, Florida, and the government gives it $1 billion, okay. First, it's got to pay some employees. Then, those employees have to go out and spend it. It's going to stay in the local community. But then you might have a father who has a girl in college or whatnot. He sends 500 or 1,000 of it to her. Now it's ending up somewhere. It's going to have to wind its way through the U.S. into various hands, so that everybody can get a piece of it. Well, that's going to take a really long time. And while fiscal policy is very direct and very, very powerful, the reason why the people aren't benefiting and the entire economy is not benefiting is because it's being targeted at the military, not at other things as well, you see. And that's the thing that Democrats do not seem to get, especially occupied Democrats. They don't get this. You have to target the deficit of what you want. The deficit, I don't know how many times I can say this and how many different ways. The deficit is not the problem. Okay, it's how the money is being spent. It's where the money is going. That's what the problem is. And when it comes down to Republican, they want to give money to rich people. They want to give money to the military. Okay, and so they deficit spend in that direction. All that does is directly impact those people. So they get direct benefit, immediate benefit, but nobody else does. You see how that works? So you have to aim the deficit at something, just like a gun. If you're going to if you want to shoot a deer, okay, you don't point your gun at a tree. Okay, and if you want to shoot a target, you don't point the gun at your head. Although Occupy Democrats might say that's the solution, but you don't. If you're aiming at a target, you don't turn the gun on yourself and say, you know what I mean? And that's what the Democratic Party has come to. Oh, well, the Republicans deficit spend, so we will not deficit spend. We're going to do the opposite. Well, you can't do that. You can't do that in an economy of 340 million people with, powerful business, and all these imports coming in. What can you do? Well, we'll have to find an alternative. I'm a guy from Arkansas. I'm a new Democrat. It's a new thing. And I got this new stuff. It's an alternative to the dollar called bank credit. It worked really well. Make my friends on Wall Street real rich. Y'all need to get a hold of a credit card. Just supplement your spending. It'll be all right.
That's a good Bubba.
You know what I mean? And then people were fooled. That's the irrational thing. These innocent Democrats were fooled into thinking that all of that deficits, as Clinton was, the deficit was being reduced towards surplus, and the jobs were just, unemployment was falling and everything. People, oh, look, it's working. He's a genius. It's just so wonderful. Yes, deficit reduction does work. Have you noticed how many credit cards are being given out? Anybody notice how many bank loans are being taken? Anybody notice how many people these days during the 90s that began consuming goods and services mainly with credit for consumption of production? Anybody notice this at all? No, we didn't. We just saw jobs. Jobs.
Hey, Ellis, this is what kills me about this exact point, right? So we've got our good old friends on the left. Now, mind you, these are our people, but they're sitting there belly aching about a consumption-based economy, and they're saying that just deficit spending is going to and make this consumption-based economy blow up. And yes. I'm saying that largely, though, the reason why things got to where they got to, and on top of it then destroyed people, was that we became a private credit-based economy. And that right there is what put us in prison. That's the real deficit, in my opinion.
The economy has to work on consumption. You need consumption. You have to consume goods and services. You're not going to do that no more. You're going to have an economy, all right? So consumption's not the problem. It's how it's being consumed and how it's being financed. Democrats are pushing private debt on us. Like I said in other programs, you've got you got Obama here in 2009 after the bank bailout, and he said, people are asking, how come we bail out the banks? Where's my bailout for the people? And he said, well, the truth is that $1 of capital in a bank will equal $10 in loans, and that'll make the economy grow much faster. All he was saying was, Bill Clinton's surplus really wrecked things. You guys had a recession in 2002. Hard to recover from that. I mean, he ran that surplus to the point where the economy just collapsed and they couldn't recover, and now look, got the global financial crisis. You guys have taken on a lot of private debt. Take some more. That's what he said. Okay, so what do I buy my toothpaste with? Well, I got a credit card for you. But don't ask me for a U.S. dollar because I ain't producing one. We're slashing the deficit. Wouldn't want to blow up the deficit.
So
Wouldn't want the private sector to have an income, would we? No.
We got a Beetlejuice moment there.
Oh, yeah, Beetlejuice. I'm feeling anxious, you know what I mean?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so Alice, okay. So Democrats have this reflexive nature to be completely issue illiterate, and their goal is to just be anti-Republican. That's all they represent anymore. They have zero identity. They are just not Republicans. That's it. That's it. That's their only identity is not Trump. And that is a completely loser's game. I'm telling you right now, as progressives, as people out there shaking this stuff, how do we make it so that they understand that if they keep shooting themselves in the foot using these things, like, do you realize that most of these bozos have been sitting there talking about Donald Trump's security detail as a means of, this is bad, oh, it's costing the taxpayers all this stuff for Trump's security detail. And this is the kind of crap that they keep throwing out there. And it's like, I can't even watch this shit. It is so intellectually vapid and vacuous that watching it is just revolting to me. I can't even pay attention anymore.
Yeah, I would agree. I'll be the first to agree with them and say, hey, look, the government's wasting some money on some serious bullshit. I got no problem with that. I agree with that, and I'm not going to argue that. All I have to say is it's not your money being wasted. It's not coming from your paycheck. So shut up. Don't complain about it in that regard. You want to complain about it on moral grounds. You want to complain about it on inefficient grounds or just a bunch of stupid shit to treat someone as though they're a king. Yeah, I'm with you on that. But you need to know it's not your money. It's not coming out of your wallet to finance that thing. All right, so you need to back off with that. And they're not going to, because Republicans say the same thing. Well, it's on the taxpayer's dime. I hate that. Taxpayers dime. In the state of Illinois, the state of Minnesota, the state of Texas, there is a taxpayer's dime. Okay, and in small town Nebraska, there's a local taxpayer's dime. But at the federal level, there's no such thing as the taxpayer's dime. Doesn't it work that way? It's just U.S. dollars and no U.S. dollars. There's tax credits and then liabilities extinguished, which means the tax credits are gone. There are no more dollars. Okay. If you're going to tax somebody, then the federal government has to also spend. But the problem is the government first spends before it taxes. People don't seem to grasp this concept either. The government has to give you the money. The federal government has to give you the dollars before it can tax you. Just like your employer has to pay you and you have to have an income before the government can tax your income. The government has to manufacture the dollars. If it's going to tax you, it has to manufacture the dollars to give you the dollars to pay that tax. If it doesn't, you have no economy. I mean, if the government only spent enough for everyone to pay their tax and did that for 100 years, none of us would be here today. If it did that 100 years ago, America wouldn't be here. It'd be a smoking crater. So Dems need to understand what these particular Dems, and once again, not the lost zombies, the ones that still have their heads about them, still have their wits about them, need to understand that just because it doesn't work this way. Okay, listen, it doesn't work this way. The Republicans are pro-gun. Okay, they want a gun in every child's hand. So, naturally the Democrats say, okay, well, we're totally anti-gun because we're the opposite. Okay, Republicans want to kill welfare. Well, Democrats want to expand welfare. Okay, great. And Republicans want to tell a woman that she can't have an abortion, and so Democrats say, no, we're for abortions. We call it pro-choice. Well, Democrats are going to deficit spend. Well, we're going to run a surplus. No, you got to stop there. Now you've lost your mind completely. All right, you can't be doing that. Just because Republicans do something, okay, deficit spend, that does not mean that deficits are bad. Just because Republicans are doing it. Republicans deficit spend, and guess what? At least they're adding some dollars to the economy, even though it's poorly targeted. At least eventually those dollars will wind their way through the economy. And we're not talking about trickle down. I'm talking about, velocity. The dollars will eventually be spent throughout each state and by people. But it takes a really long time, okay? But at least dollars are being spent into the economy, for Christ's sake. When you got someone like Clinton, he's stripping dollars. He's not only killed off the private sector's income completely, but he is also busy taking away your savings as well and destroying that and saying, have a credit card. I mean? All right, so, you can't, that's called madness. That's neoliberal madness.
I want to say this real quick. It sounds to me like what you're saying is that Occupy Democrats is saying, hey, go get yourself a credit card, as opposed to fighting for the 99% to have the public purpose spent on the people. That's exactly what they're doing when they say, hey, Obama reduced the deficit. That's what they're saying. Am I right? Is that close?
If Occupy Democrats are saying Bush blew up the deficit, Obama reduced the deficit, Democrats always have to clean up Republican methods. If they're saying that, then what they're saying is, I hate US dollars. I don't want to see another one again. I love bank credit. I love bank loans. I love credit cards. I can't get enough of private debt. I want to drown in private debt, and I never want to see a US dollar again in my life. That's what they're saying. They're saying Bush blew up. This is why it's hilarious. When they say Bush blew up the deficit, what they're saying is Bush increased the private sector's income. Obama reduced it. And I used to tell these fools 2-3 years ago, I said, on Twitter, I say, look, you know, guys, you don't know what you're saying. If you could only understand what you're saying. Whenever you sit there and say, Obama reduced the deficit, you're saying, yeah, Obama killed jobs. He caused unemployment. Yeah. I mean, you don't know what you're saying, and you need to stop talking now. And they just would not stop talking. They just, toe the party line. And the reason why is because Democrats don't deficit spend simply because Republicans do. And economies just don't work that way. You can't make an economy work by doing the opposite of what your enemy does. That's not how things work at all. A dollar is still a dollar, damn it. It still buys food. It still buys clothes. It still funds universal health care, Well, where are you going to get them if not from the government? Okay, and how are you going to get them left into the economy so that Steve Grumbine or somebody else or Linda here can get a hold of them? Unless the government deficit spends. When it deficit spends, it's leaving dollars in the economy. Okay, well, that's the only way you're going to get dollars in the economy, and your only other alternative is bank credit. And that shit has to be paid back, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
So let me ask you, Ellis, as we're sitting there looking at the Trump administration, how does somebody who is awake, these people always saying, yeah, I'm awake, I'm woke as fuck. How does somebody that's truly woke as fuck, as a progressive, look at the deficit spending? Because, the Democrats are reflexively just simply against whatever. How does a thinking person, not a Democrat, because we're obviously leaving zombie apocalypse,
right,
for the living, how do we deal with deficits? How do we look at what to stand against and what to fight for and for against? Because obviously, and you stated, the Republicans typically deficit spend in the wrong places. So reflexively, Democrats will say, it's in the wrong places. They won't even bother thinking through the problem because that's too much thought for a zombie to give. So how do you assess this? What do you look for?
What you got to do when it comes to Trump is you have to look at what is he proposing. Okay, so he says he's going to deficit spend. Okay, that's great. What on should be the question. You see how sensible that is?
Yeah.
if Steve, this is a micro level thing, totally unrelated. But if Steve Grumbine comes to me and says, "I'm going to spend $30,000," usually the question would be, on what? Because he didn't tell me. Okay, so when Trump says, "I'm going to deficit spend," what he's saying is, I am going to have Congress manufacture some U.S. dollars, and I'm going to spend them. The question of any normal thinking human being at that point should be, spend them on what though? You see? And then he tells you, I'm going to spend them on the military. You say, okay, well, that will bolster the military, but what about everyone else? Well, I'm going to spend on infrastructure. Yes, but how are you going to do that? You're just going to pay contractors and get to work on the roads? And then he says, well, no, I've been thinking about privatizing it all and turning the highways into toll roads. Well, you're a fuckhead. At that point, you say, I don't care what your fucking deficit spend, you're a fucking moron. All right? So that's what you've got to do as a rational thinking human being. You've got to stop listening to political parties. And when a politician says we're about to deficit spend, you have to ask, on what? Okay? And if they're not going to deficit spend on something that should be beneficial to everyone, economy-wide, to all citizens, if it's not going to benefit, then it's not a good idea. it's just a bad idea to be deficit spending in that regard. Now, like I said, the military is important, but when we're talking about tax cuts for the wealthy, tax cuts for extremely wealthy, let's give some subsidies to corporations, some more corporate welfare stuff. It's quite obvious that that's not going to benefit anyone or be of any use except a small handful of people that it's targeting. So a right-thinking individual would realize, the deficit isn't the problem because that's how the private sector derives its income, because the currency issuer gives it dollars. The question is where are the dollars going? What are they being spent for? You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. So let's talk about real quick what puts us into a situation where we are stuck having to quote unquote deficit spend. It comes down to sectoral balances, which you talked about a few weeks back.
Yeah.
So, when we talk about deficit spending, people that don't think past this particular live stream and they don't bother doing the homework and talking through it, they don't see the bathtub. And so somebody said, I wonder if Ellis is going to draw the bathtub to talk about deficit spending. And I said, well, you know what? Maybe I'll ask him if he'll do the bathtub because he's got the board up there behind him. Folks don't understand that it really comes down to, are you a net importer or are you a net exporter? What's your current account balances? And where are you at in this game with private debt, public, and the rest of world? Can you just take a stab at showing that for them? Because I think it's like the most effective drawing of them all.
We go through the sectoral balances really quick?
Sure.
Okay. Well, that's not a problem. Let me lift this up, though, so that I can stand up. Get this out of the way here.
And while you're doing it, Patricia, just so you know, there is a bathtub video on YouTube, several of them, and I will get them out there to see you guys after the show. But hopefully you'll be able to use this one.
Okay, hopefully it works. Okay, so the sectoral balances equation. During the sectoral balances show that we did, I derived the equation so I can show you where it came from. Comes from the national account. This is a form of the sectoral balances equation, which confirms the currency issuing national government on the left side of the equation, and then the non-government sector on the right side. So we have government spending minus taxation equals savings minus investment, minus exports minus imports, okay? We aggregate, that means we put together these two sectors here. This is the non-government sector, and this is the government sector. Okay, so the currency issuers are over here, and currency users are over here. And whatever the currency issuer, therefore deficit spend, will be found somewhere in the non-government sector. Okay, I caution you that the sectoral balances equation is not subject to opinion. Okay, this is an accounting identity. This is reality here. There's no way around that. All right? This is not an opinion. So, when the federal government deficit spends into the non-government sector, those dollars, what it's doing is it's depositing. So if the government itself, let us say, were running a $1 trillion deficit, okay? Okay, if it were running a $1 trillion deficit, what that means is in the non-government sector, over here, will be found exactly $1 trillion. Okay, so if it's running a $1 trillion deficit, that $1 trillion has been deposited in the non-government sector. So the way deficit spending works is that, once again, for everybody home, a $1 trillion federal budget deficit equals to the penny a $1 trillion surplus for the domestic private sector and the foreign sector combined. See how that works? Which we call the non-government sector. A surplus is the exact reverse. if the federal government is running a $1 trillion surplus, then the non-government sector experiences a $1 trillion deficit. Why is this? Because somebody's spending is somebody's income. It's just that simple. And if the government is spending, in other words, if it's deficit spending, which means it's leaving more dollars than it's taxing out. If it's deficit spending, then that is income for the non-government sector, because the currency issuer is the monopolist. It's the only place you can get dollars. So when it's deficit spending, it's depositing dollars, and when it's running a surplus, it's withdrawing dollars from the private sector, from the private sector. So this is why when Republicans run deficits, that deficits aren't bad. You need deficits, especially when you have what we call a current account deficit, okay? When we're importing far more than we're exporting, what that means is that dollars, US dollars, are flowing out of the US citizens' hands, out of US citizens' hands and into foreigners' hands. So if you're importing more than you're exporting, you've got US consumers, okay? They're taking their paychecks and they're buying imported goods at Walmart and whatnot, and those dollars flow from US citizens' hands to foreign hands, okay? That means they're no longer available. They're no longer available. Can you tell that Austrian to shut up, Steve? Steve,
yes.
See him down there? That Austrian's like, he's like derailing conversations, talking about how wealth is created.
Yeah, Jules, you need to get off here. Folks, boot Jules. Get Jules out of here. Jules is serving no value whatsoever. I'm trying to get rid of Jules right now. Jules serves zero value.
Derailing conversations. What he's doing is derailing learning opportunities. We are talking about sectoral balances and how federal spending works and how a macroeconomy works. We're not talking about Austrian free market theory here and what happens when a business runs this and that and the other. Okay, that's a bunch of nonsense. All right. If you want to understand MMT, if you want to understand sectoral balances, fine. That's what we're talking about here. What we're not talking about is Scientology. We're not talking about Austrianism. We're not talking about New Keynesian theory. We're not talking about DSGE. The subject is MMT and sectoral balances. So if you want to participate, that's fine. If not, at least let others learn, okay, who are here to learn. That's all that matters. Good. Take your inflation and take your gold standard and piss off with it.
What an awful person. God.
So anyway, so where we were was saying when you have imports versus exports, and the U.S. is importing more than it's exporting, what's occurring is the U.S. government is first deficit spending into the economy, and some of those dollars are leaving the U.S. domestic economy and going into foreign hands. And the reason why that is because we're buying more imports than we're exporting. So once those dollars enter foreign hands, okay, that means that they're no longer available for U.S. citizens to spend. So we can use a tub to explain this quite easily. If you put a tub here, okay, and we call this the U.S. economy, the U.S. domestic economy, okay, and then we put another tub over here, and we call this the foreign sector, okay, what we can see is the U.S. government deficit spends into the domestic economy, filling up the tank here with dollars. Okay, so we're going to put some dollars here. There's your U.S. dollars. They came from the federal government. It created them. Deficit spent them into the economy. Everyone's happy. Now, some people in the U.S., Steve Grumbine, he's guilty. So am I, because I bought imported goods. You know, there's BMWs. There's Chinese goods. There's foreign imports like clothing and food and all that sorts of stuff, okay? When Americans buy imports, okay, the dollars that the government deficit spent in the economy travel this way, okay, and they end up over here. in foreign hands. And so that begins to rise. Their dollar total in savings, their dollar savings begins to rise. Where the dollars in the domestic economy begin to drop. See that? They begin to drop. So there's fewer dollars here. Okay. The government, therefore, in order to maintain a state of full employment and maximum production, it has to continue deficit spending and fill the tub back up. See that? Because imports are causing dollars to vacate the domestic economy and enter foreign hands. It's real simple. Okay? So as the bathtub falls, the government has to fill it up again. It's real easy. But the way we've been doing it with Obama and the Democrats, okay, we've been allowing the condition of imports to persist because you have to. I mean, there's not much you can do about that. Okay? But we've been allowing the level of U.S. dollars in the economy, in the U.S. domestic economy, to drop and continuously fall. You see that? And we've been taxing them out as well. So, you've also got taxes. So some dollars are leaking out in taxes as well. So the solution that the Democrats have been presenting is to put bank credit, which we can use as a red dollar symbol here. These are bank IOUs. Okay? They are an alternative to the US dollar. Because when a bank lends, it creates its own little IOU and then it denominates it in the US government's unit of account. The reason why it does that is so that it will behave like a dollar. And when it behaves like a dollar, you can buy things with it, you see. The only thing is it has to be paid back. So what a bank does is it increases private debt. So as the deficit is being reduced, the number of dollars in the US economy are falling and falling. Some of them are making their way to the foreign sector through imports. Some are coming out in taxes, and some are being pooled as savings, like the rich. They're just saving, and some of it is what we call a demand leakage. The government actually encouraging it, where it encourages people to save by giving it a tax advantage. Like, for instance, put your money in an IRA. An IRA is a demand leakage. It's just reducing the level of dollars available to be spent to maintain employment levels. So as that drops and as we slash the deficit, you just allow bank credit, which is an alternative to a US dollar, to fill that demand for dollars. And for a while, everything is fine. Jobs are created and stuff. But when consumers cannot take on any more credit cards, cannot take on any more loans, no more private debt, just can't do it anymore, they're going to stop their spending. And when that happens, you're going to get a recession like you did in 2002. Okay? It's really that simple. And the reason why is because if you look at the sectoral balances equation here, the U.S. government, U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, is the sole issuer of U.S. dollars. It is the monopoly issuer. No one else is allowed to do that. So if the government is not spending, if it's not deficit spending, the private sector, for familiarity, is not getting an income. See? So, and we can express a deficit this way. G minus T is greater than 0, where government spending minus taxation is greater than 0. So in other words, whatever the government spends minus what it taxes, if that number is positive, if there's a remainder, then that's a deficit. So if it spends $2 trillion, taxes away $1 trillion, that's a $1 trillion deficit. But in reality, what it is, it's a $1 trillion deposit of new dollars into the U.S. economy for people to use. Simple.
Real quickly, let's pretend like that we are now behaving as Germany. We are now a net exporter. We now have a very different world ahead of us. We're actually the ones that are using all our resources and stuff and selling our goods and services as opposed to the other way around. Explain the difference and explain why someone like Mosler would advocate for being a net importer, and then speak a little bit about why we don't really have any say-so in this also.
You want to know why being a net exporter would affect government spending?
Yes, just
Okay.
I mean, I know why, but if you'll talk to it.
Sure. The reason why is because if you're exporting more than you're importing, if you're a net exporter, meaning you're importing or exporting more than you're importing, what's happening is the dollars are flowing into the United States, into the domestic economy to buy U.S. goods. Okay? So when that happens, employment starts to rise. Okay? And if you're surplus, if you're running an external surplus, serious surplus, okay, and it's big enough, like Norway is a perfect example. Norway has an external surplus. Then what would happen if government continued to deficit spend on top of all of the dollars coming into the economy because the foreign sector is financing the U.S. domestic economy now? All that excess spending would push us past the real ability of the U.S. economy to produce goods and services, and it would result in inflation. So if you have a situation where you're exporting far more than you're importing, and sufficiently, you have a surplus in sufficient size, current account surplus in sufficient size, then the government can run a surplus because it makes sense at that point. It makes all the sense in the world. You don't want to excess deficit spend because excessive deficit spending can be inflationary.
Oh, wait a minute, hold on. So, folks, I hope we capture that. Nobody has ever said to just spend wantonly without any thought, without any. We have just broken down. If you hear anyone say otherwise, you just heard in spades right there. There is a proper way of doing this. Anyone that says otherwise is literally lying.
Yeah. The proper way to do this is you have to understand that the way a fiat currency works is real simple. You have a barrier, okay? You have a demand pull inflation barrier. And what that is basically, it's the level of goods and services that can be possibly produced, okay? In other words, it's what the U.S. economy, since we're talking about the United States, it's what the U.S. economy can produce, real goods and services, okay? That is its maximum potential, all right? That is your inflation barrier. And people say, well, how do you know when we've reached it? How do you know we're at maximum production? When there is absolutely no more labor available to hire, to employ, to increase output, okay? At that point of full employment, then you run the risk of government spending exceeding the real ability of the economy to respond with increased output. And you could get inflation. The reason why is very simple. Government deficit spends into the economy. Remember that? Fine, great. Consumers have a savings. Everybody wants to save. Okay, but they have to spend too. So when the U.S. government is deficit spending into the economy, okay, it's taking pressure off of consumer savings, allowing them to spend more. Okay? So when they spend more, business receives an increased demand for goods and services. Business responds to that increase by hiring more workers to meet that demand. See that? When we get to the point, though, where that government deficit spending can no longer result in output, increased output, when you have every last worker that can work is employed full-time, and not a single new dollar deficit spent into the economy by the government will result in another can of beans or another car. When we are at maximum output and can't go any further, deficit spending beyond that will become inflationary. It's just
not
that simple.
hyperinflationary.
No,
not hyperinflationary.
Inflationary. That means that you will start to see, because there is no way to create another can of beans to maintain market share, all that will happen is the companies, the firms will begin marking up the prices in order to push back against the demand to lower it, okay, to reduce the demand. But if you keep giving more people more money, they're going to start spending and spending and spending, and those goods aren't going to be available, and people are going to be competing for rarer and rarer goods and services. Okay? And it's going to end up to be inflationary. So if government stops spending or raises taxes sufficiently, it will reduce the inflationary pressure. But you know what the problem with that is that it creates unemployment, right? That's why the job guarantee is very important. Because here the government can adjust fiscal policy to deal with inflationary pressures or wage price spiral, but not unemploy anybody, not leaving anyone involuntary unemployed. See? So you can so what I'm trying to tell you is that the federal job guarantee that we've talked about many times, and that Pavlin has talked about, the federal job guarantee attenuates inflationary pressure. It vacates the Phillips curve. It makes the Phillips curve redundant. It doesn't make any, Phillips curve has no meaning anymore, because if inflationary pressures rise, workers will just transfer seamlessly. When government adjusts fiscal policy, they will just transfer seamlessly from the private sector to the fixed wage JG, and the private sector, which is inflating, will stop inflating. And the pressure will drop, and that'll be that. And no increase in unemployment.
Hey, Rosemary brings up a wonderful idea, a wonderful question that everybody should be asking their elected representatives, that they should be going to town halls, they should be going to the DNC, they should be going to every single Republican, Green, you name it. And they should be asking this question that Rosemary asks. She says, then why doesn't the government do this? What a phenomenal question. Mm-hmm. Why doesn't the government do this, Ellis? The gap, the whole gap, and nothing but the gap? What is
it's not the government. That's the thing. That's another thing that I wish Democrats could get through their head, and Republicans as well. It's very helpful when you understand that the federal government is an institution. It's a public institution. It's not a human being. Okay? It requires human beings to make it do things. So the government itself is, simply put, a neutral entity. It takes human beings to mess with it and make it do things through legislation, and then it could do bad things or it could do good things. The problem is that the politicians are paid by the people that they represent not to do good things. And the people they represent is not the people. It's business interests, lobbyists, capital, people that can afford to pay them huge, gigantic donate to their campaigns and whatnot. These are the people that control them. Okay, so they're only going to do what's best for those people, which happens to be not you. That's why government doesn't do the right thing. But we were also talking about, to finish off this, you asked about net importer and why there's nothing wrong with it. To finish that off, the way it works is different than the mainstream would have you believe. When we talk about being an exporter versus an importer, the truth is exports are actually real costs. I want this to be clear to people too, so please listen to me, pay attention. Exports for the US would be a real cost, but imports into the US are a real benefit. All right, they raise our standard of living. So let me put this into perspective for you to understand that. If the US is exporting more than it's exporting, what it's doing is it's taking the goods that it's producing here. It's using its labor, it's using its raw materials, it's using its agricultural land, and instead of consuming it ourselves as Americans, we ship it off to another nation in exchange for paper. Yay. Got it. Okay. Well, this is what happens. This is what happens with China. China's a perfect example. China is shipping $3 trillion worth of its goods here. Okay, so a bunch of Chinese people are working hard day and night to manufacture these goods, and it's taking its real production, it's taking its real resources, producing goods and services. And guess what it's doing? Instead of China consuming this wealth itself, it's shipping it off to the United States for a paper bank statement, as Warren Mosler would say. That's all it gets in return. We get to consume their production, and they get a paper bank statement from the Federal Reserve. And that's all they get. Okay, so you need to understand when you say buy American, export American, export. What you're saying is let's take our wealth and send it off somewhere else and let other people benefit from our agriculture and benefit from our steel production and all of let other people benefit from it. All we want are bits of bank statements. That's all we really want. We just want bank statements. That's insane. Okay, so if you are importing more than you're exporting, manufacturing jobs are falling right and left. But that just leaves us available to do something different with work, redefine work and go in a different direction. Okay, so we're importing. We can live off of this stuff. We've got our own food supply. We're pretty good. So now we don't have to worry about these drudgery jobs. Let's go do something really cool with our lives and get paid to do it. Eh? Real benefit, all right? Imports are benefits. Don't shun imports, all right?
It seems like, the low-hanging fruit in the political space is to, these narratives that they create, they always have to fit on a bumper sticker. Like you said, buy American, this, that, and the other. They're taking our jobs, Ellis. God damn it, they're taking our jobs.
There's nothing wrong with buying American, Steve. There really isn't. It's when you go fanatic and say, don't buy Japanese, don't buy Chinese, don't buy German, only buy American. What you're saying is, we want our standard of living to collapse as soon as possible, too. No more foreign goods of any kind. You say, well, I kind of like the BMW. Yeah, it's a good car, but buy American. I mean, just what the... I mean, America is a vast marketplace. Have you ever seen anything like it? You can get anything in America. It's all shipped here. It's like the Roman Empire 2.0. Eh? You can get anything you want here from anywhere in the world, right? You don't think that's an increase in the standard of living? Give me a break, man. We're way up there. Oh, you don't like your Samsung phone? You don't like your Samsung TV? You don't like your Sony TV? You don't like your Japanese car, your little Honda Accord there? Okay, well, we could just get rid of all that. No, wait, don't touch my computer. Don't touch my TV. Don't. That's what I thought. Okay? they get bits of paper. You understand? They get bits of paper called US dollars that never leave the country. They just sit at the Federal Reserve. That's all they do. That's all they get in return for giving us TVs. They get dollars they can't use in their own country, and they sit at the Federal Reserve. They just get a paper bank statement, and we get their production. We don't have to work for it. They're just feeding it to us free. Think about it.
All right, so hold on real quickly. One of our star pupils is actually asking a question, and she has been out there slugging it out like you wouldn't believe. So Joy Hire, you're on fire. She's saying, hey, I'm getting confused now because, quite frankly, people don't understand that the reason why this whole net importer, net exporter thing is a problem for us today is because our government is not deficit spending. It's because it's not spending into the population. So the jobs are leaving the country, so to speak, and we're not replacing them. We're not fixing our infrastructure. We're not fixing our medical system. We're not fixing our education system. We're not fixing any of these things. Yeah. So naturally, it hurts. And the thing you say is, well, shit, the government's broke. We got to bring the jobs back. Instead of realizing the government's flush and the jobs can go because we don't want those jobs. We need a modern economy to go with our modern money. And that modern economy could be building out our infrastructure. All the very things that we've been talking about platform-wise, that's where the modern jobs come from.
Yeah. So you see, what happens is the imports are not bad whatsoever. The problem is when, government makes some trade deals, some stupid trade deals, and then the business goes ahead and starts shipping off jobs. We don't replace them. We let everything collapse around us, okay? And we don't produce anything, right? So we're watching all of America, sit around and saying, okay, well, what are we going to do with our labor force? What are we going to do with our production infrastructure? What are we going to do with our infrastructure? Nothing. Let it crumble. Let's gamble on Wall Street. Let's speculate with food commodities. Yeah, speculate. We'll have a speculation economy. This shit isn't going to work. That's not going to work. And this is what you get. It's not because people aren't buying enough America, and it's not because there are so many imports. It's because the US government is not responding with appropriate deficit spending to the import situation. It has to constantly be filling up the tank. It has to fill up the domestic economy with more dollars to maintain full employment. What kind of employment? Be thankful you're not getting your fingers ripped off in an industrial accident in a factory. Okay? Those jobs are gone. We can replace them with better jobs, green jobs, sustainable output. Yeah? So let's do that. But, government, it doesn't want to. You got your politicians, climate change isn't real. Then you got the Democrats saying, fight climate science denial, not climate change. Just got to stop people from thinking certain ways. Ain't going to do any good, man. All right, so.
So, all right, Ellis. So we're up over the hour mark here. Let's find a way to wind this down real quick.
Okay.
So, we have various people who absolutely are trapped. I mean, when I say trapped, I am talking about mental breakdown trapped, stuck in the Eugene V. Debs industrial era.
Yeah.
And no knock on Eugene V., okay?
No.
So
Eugene's the guy, all right?
His logic was flawless for its time. However, the sensibilities of the Industrial Revolution, you got to pick and choose what's relative to today.
Yeah.
In today's environment, we're kind of holding ourselves back, thinking about the status quo of yesteryear. I mean, can we close out with this discussion, because this is one of my favorite ones that you and I have when we talk offline.
The status quo of yesteryear.
Yes.
Gold standard socialism and gold standard progressivism.
This whole notion of the tax and spend liberal the whole thing.
You got to fight capital. Labor has to fight capital, and we're going to have a strike. And we got and get into the stockyards and get into a punch-up, as Jimmy Hoffa would say. Now we're going to get into a punch-up. We got to get into that, And the reason why I had to get into a punch-up with capital is because during a gold standard, the government had to tax and it had to borrow to spend because it had to defend its gold reserves. It's real simple. Ow. And so anyway, the whiteboard hates me. David hates me.
It thinks you're capital. It thinks you're the.
Hey, piss off, man. God. All right, so anyway, I have to go through this because I still haven't finished my house so I can get this thing up on the wall. I got to do these broadcasts from my room. All right, so anyway, man. So anyway, the gold standard's all about, and the government has to stand ready to exchange dollars for gold at the fixed exchange, rate. Well, it can run out of gold. So, it can't be adding more and more dollars into circulation. It's got to maintain a certain level at all times to defend those gold reserves. So it must tax and borrow to do its thing. This gives capital a lot of weight. Capital, if it's absorbing the majority of deficit spending, if it's the greater beneficiary, then you've got to reckon with it, because literally the government needs the tax dollars from them to fund things that would benefit the public purpose, doesn't it? And capital's not going to give up. So you got to fight in the stockyards. But you got to fight for a wage increase. You got to fight. That's not necessary today. No, you see, the government with a flexible currency arrangement like the US dollar today, like the British pound, like the Canadian dollar, Japanese yen, Australian dollar, all government has to do is decide to have a job guarantee. And by virtue of doing that, it just buys up labor, right? That the market doesn't want, pay a fixed minimum wage. And if it set that wage, $15 an hour thing, say, well, we achieved it, $15 an hour. That's all well and good, but it should be 25. Okay? So, I mean, we just decide, what do you want that wage to be? Well, we want it to be $25 an hour. Okay, well, then that's the national minimum now. Employers are going to have to meet it and exceed it in order to coax people out of the job guarantee. Guess what? You've automatically raised the wage, okay? And you've already disciplined the business leader. He can't be an asshole anymore. He can't threaten you with unemployment. He can't be an asshole at work because you can just walk out and have a job that day. Right? So you don't need to fight it out with capital. Your fight is at the government level. See, here's the thing. Eugene V. Debs, okay, he had to first fight it out in the stockyards with capital. Then he had to also fight on another front against the politicians, trying to get everything to work, okay? Well, guess what now? If Eugene V. Debs were alive today, all he'd have to do is have a fight with the politicians. He'd just need to stand up on his pulpit and speak to the people and say, we need to fund these things because the government can't run out of money. It's the currency issue. There's no gold standard anymore. We can fund anything we want, and we need a job guarantee now. He wouldn't have to fight capital. He could ignore capital. And that's what I'm asking you to do. Ignore the rich because they're irrelevant to prosperity. See?
That is just an amazing comment because, the trolls of the world that don't have the ability to think through the problems, they're allowed to be wrong, right? Everybody's allowed to be wrong. Everybody's allowed to be ignorant. But what you're not allowed to do is say that we said something that we didn't say or misstate something we said in a way that's wrong and come off as an authority because that's when we start going friggin' full throat punch.
Yeah, you're not allowed to say that I said, don't tax the rich. I didn't say that. I said they are irrelevant to prosperity. You don't need the dollars to prosper, for everyone else to prosper, because in order for the rich to get a hold of dollars, the government has to first spend them into existence. After it's done that, then it taxes them away. So taxation is destruction. No one is saying don't tax the rich. You tax the rich for equity's sake. You tax Wall Street. You know that, Robin Hood tax that Bernie Sanders is talking about taxing Wall Street. Each trade gets taxed. These are all, that's going to modify the behavior of the rich. These taxes increase, they create better equity, okay? But what they don't do is fund universal health care. Okay, those dollars are not taken from the rich and then handed to the poor. It doesn't work that way. The government, I love this one too. This one's my favorite, Steve. Where people say it's a shell game. If you're taxing Bob here and destroying a dollar and then just creating a new dollar and putting it over here, that's nothing but a shell game. No, it's not a shell game because the dollar that was taxed was previously spent to begin with. You have to actually put dollars in the economy to tax them out. Okay? So there's no shell game going on here. If I'm destroying a dollar of a rich person by taxation, that's a dollar that he previously earned during another fiscal year entirely, a previous fiscal year. And if I type right now the number $2 and put it over here for universal health care, that's current spending. The taxation of the rich is taxation on prior deficit spending from a prior fiscal year. It's not funding anything. It's not doing it. So let the government spend, and then after it has spent for the public purpose and for full employment, then you tax the rich. We don't depend on the rich. How about this? Would any of you out there be satisfied to say, Ellis said, don't depend on the rich. Depend on government spending. Would that help? Don't depend on the rich because you don't need to. They're not giving you anything. Okay, does that help?
The tax dollars are deleted.
Yeah, they're just deleted. Don't depend on the rich for salvation because they're not Jesus Christ. They're totally irrelevant. Okay?
All right, I lied to you. I got one more thing that plays off of this, and then we can close out.
Okay.
So some guy who thought he was being crafty and slick decided he was going to write an article about me and my interview with Warren Mosler. And he decided that he was going to attack the approach that federal taxes don't fund spending. And he made a mockery, tried to make a mockery of me, wrote this long diatribe, basically henpecking some little twiddly-deedly-dee things and really trying to make up, but he missed the entire point. The fact is, you just laid it out. Can you address the concept of federal taxes do not fund spending? Can you just address that head on?
Yeah. The simple fact is the government lays a tax first. At the founding of the nation, it needs to be understood. Lays a tax, and then it says there's a punishment for not paying it. All right, this causes people to fear the tax. Then it says you can only pay the tax, settle the tax with my currency, the US dollar, from the government. Okay? The government says, otherwise you're going to jail. So people say, well, how are we going to get a hold of US dollars? They don't exist. The government says, well, don't worry. I'm the constitutionally authorized monopolist. I create dollars out of thin air for you. Well, give them to us. The government says, no, I shan't do that. I need things to operate. I need pencils, paper, chair, ink, okay, carpet, the works, guns, bullets. You sell me that, I'll give you the money. I'll create the dollars and hand it to you. And if you, poor person over there, want a job, I'm hiring. Okay, and then I'll pay you a wage with my own currency. I'll create it and pay you a paycheck. Dollars get into the economy. Once they're in the economy, then the people pay the taxes. Okay? Notice that the dollars are there before they pay the taxes. They were spent by the government, then they were taxed away. Okay? When you say that federal taxes do not fund federal spending, what is meant is tax dollars are not taken from the rich man by Robin Hood and then ridden through Sherwood Forest and given to a poor person and saying, here you go. It doesn't work that way. The reason why? Because for the government to even be able to tax away the dollars from the rich guy, the government must first spend those dollars into the economy, and the rich guy has to get his hands on them so that the government can say, aha, and get them. All it does is destroy them. It's a tax credit. That means that you have a tax liability. Once the IRS, once the government says, Steve Grumbine now has a tax liability of $2,000, that means he's in the hole. He's got to fix that. He's got to get rid of that liability. He's got to settle it. The only way is with tax credits. They're US dollars. That's what a US dollar is. He takes his tax credit, he takes 2,000 of those tax credits and applies it to that $2,000 liability. The liability becomes zero. The government destroys both the liability and the dollar. Federal taxation is the annihilation of dollars, and federal spending is money creation. It's just that simple. They're two separate operations. They're not relative to one another. They're not related to one another, except for inflationary cases. And, you know, if government spending too much and starts to get inflationary pressure at full employment, well, then taxes are raised to reduce that. But beyond that, federal taxation is not a method to pay for things. The taxation, yes, not the dollars. The dollars collected, tax collections are not used. A US dollar can only be created once and spent once by the government, and then it's destroyed. It can be spent numerous times by the private sector, but not the government. Only once.
Excellent. All right, Ellis, we're up on it. We're coming up on 10 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank you for your time, sir. It was a wonderful, this was a fun one. You were right. This was actually a very fun. I wish we could have gotten started on time, but thank God we got through the technical issues.
Yeah.
But this was one of my favorite ones we've done so far. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people really enjoyed tonight as well. Folks, if you enjoyed Real Progressives, please come back. Please invite your friends. Please share our content. And if you so choose, Real Progressives could use your help supporting through our Patreon account to help us advance our technology and advance our ability to get our reach out there even further so that we can push product out there, good writing, get out there in public, travel, get these things into the people's hands. So with that, I'm going to say thank you again, Ellis, and thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful evening. We'll talk to you soon.